What is up guys, Blue Spooky here. My neck is feeling a little better sooner than I expected, so I'll be going right back into the 1-hour true scary story videos. If you guys are enjoying these daily videos and want to ensure I can keep doing them for as long as possible, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you end up enjoying this one. Especially if we could get to 1,000 likes for these normal videos, that really helps these to do well and ensure that I don't need to take any breaks or anything. Without further ado guys, I will let you enjoy the next hour of true scary stories, and I will see you again at the end of the video. This took place when I was only 18, and I already had some bad experiences with guys in real life. I'm going to leave out real names for privacy reasons. For context, I'm also a woman. There was this one guy who I'd like to talk to in YouTube comments from time to time. He seemed relatively normal during our comment chats, so eventually I decided to add him on Discord. That turned out to be a real mistake though. Turned out he was actually a huge creep with a weird foot fetish. When we first started talking on Discord, everything seemed perfectly normal until he asked me what my shoe size was. At the time, I didn't really understand what a fetish even was, let alone a foot fetish in particular. After I answered him and gave him my shoe size, he said that he had one, and he went on to tell me that he watched hentai all the time. I had no clue what that was until he told me. After he told me in very graphic detail, I was pretty disgusted with him. It was so weird how he was just talking to me about this stuff right away, and out in the open. And that's some stuff you only share with someone you're really close to. He was in a few of my other Discord servers as well, and he would lash out at me whenever they would get raided. I knew some of his ex-internet friends, but I didn't know at the time that they really didn't like him. The first time one of my servers got raided, the people who raided it went after him specifically. He really took it out on me. I remember one time I couldn't get online because I was at a graduation practice. He texted me over and over and called me dozens of times as well. He called me ignorant for not coming online to talk with him. Eventually, I just decided to delete all his contact information and the server as well because he was spamming me so much. He insisted I be online at every second of the day to chat with him. It was really getting exhausting. I found out soon why his friends hated him so much. Apparently, he was 20 at the time, and he was dating a 14-year-old girl. I found out because he actually told me directly. I didn't know the entire story, but it already seemed bad enough just from what I could get from them. After that, I knew this guy was extremely weird, and I was better off not associating with him. Eventually, though, he contacted me in a different number and texted me many things. He also called me 21 times one day. He said he wouldn't be so mean to me if we started dating, but of course I declined his offer to date me. He repeatedly contacted me from various accounts, asking me to date him over and over. I ignored the question for a while and tried to just keep blocking him. He kept on messaging me though, and eventually I gave in and told him I would. I was afraid he would flip out on me and what he would do if I kept refusing. We ended up dating for only about 4 days. Of course, the first thing he wanted after we started dating was a foot pic from me. I tried to tell him I really didn't want to, but he kept on insisting I send one and get out of bed. In the midst of all this, I also recall him sending me a picture of his anime girl body pillow and telling me he was a weeaboo, whatever that means. Eventually, I told one of my internet friends about what was going on, and they all confronted him in a group call. After he was confronted for what he did, he told me that he hoped I would die and sent me a video telling me to consider suicide. He also blamed me for making all of our mutual friends disassociate from him. After that, he stopped contacting me for a while. After all this went down, though, I heard from someone else that the same guy still wanted to do sexual acts with me. It still made me feel really uneasy. Luckily, I changed all my numbers and stuff, so I didn't have to talk to him anymore. I also didn't have to deal with him spamming anime feet pics in my Discord anymore. What a real creep he was. This is a true experience that happened to my brother and I. We still don't really have any kind of explanation for what happened, so I'm sharing it online in the hopes that someone might have some ideas. I mean, we can guess what it was, but we can't explain really. It happened when I was in high school. My brother is a few years younger than I am. Back then, I had a games console in my bedroom, and my brother didn't. It was a PS2. Those really were the days. After lights out, once we heard our dad snoring, my brother would sneak into my room to play video games with me. Sometimes I would let him sleep in my room as well. He would often fall asleep with the game on. I would be in bed by the wall and my brother would be on the camper bed on the floor, right next to my bed. My bed was a little raised up, so I could see the TV even if he was in that bed. On the night this happened, my brother came into my bedroom to play some RPG game called Tales of the Abyss or something. I usually fell asleep before he stopped playing, but for some reason that night I was really restless. I couldn't get to sleep or even feel sleepy at all. I decided to just watch him play for a while. After a while, not sure exactly how long, he shut off the game and turned off the TV and climbed into the camper bed. About a minute after he got into bed, I heard something strange, though. I heard this really heavy breathing sound coming from down there. I ignored it, believing my brother was just taking a deep breath or having a cold or something. I don't know. I tried to just go to sleep. It was annoying. I wondered if he was having some trouble breathing, though, so I looked over at him. It was too dark to see his face. I could just make out his outline on the bed, and the breathing noise he was making was really creepy. I didn't like it. It sounded like this drawn-out, raspy kind of wheezing that almost sounded like someone holding in a laugh. Laughter being drowned out by the harshness of exhalation. I hope that makes sense. It didn't sound like he was showing any signs of stopping. I laid there for a while, thinking about what to do, and feeling a little unnerved now. I was very concerned. My brother suddenly got up and approached my bed. He whispered something to me that I couldn't quite understand. I didn't know what he was talking about. I replied just so. "What are you saying? It sounds like you're hurt or something. You're breathing weird. It's a bit scary," I told him. I thought it was him who had been breathing like that, but then he said something that chilled me to the core. "It wasn't me. It sounded like it was coming from your bed, but lower." I felt my skin go cold when he said that. There was someone or something in here with us. I hit the light. There was a desk lamp near my bed. When the lights came on, though, we saw the room was empty. There was only us in there. We were too scared to sleep. We didn't leave the room. We just couldn't move. My brother got into my bed, and we stayed there until the sunlight shone through the gaps in the curtains. I have no idea what the hell happened that night, or what it was. It only ever happened just that one time. That creepy, laughing, wheezing, breathing thing. It never did happen again. It's hands down the scariest thing that either of us ever encountered. This happened in 2015, when I was 16 years old and still living in my hometown. It's a forgotten little beach town in the middle of nowhere that's so far removed that it's probably not even known by the surrounding areas. Basically, there are only 3 things you can do there as a teenager. You can go to the movies, swim, or go to this pathetic little place called Miller's Fun Park. It's relatively similar to a lot of local theme parks, only a whole lot worse. There was a crappy little arcade with broken skee-ball machines, batting cages that probably hadn't been used since the 80s, a mini golf course, and the most dangerous go-kart you've ever seen in your life. Seriously, Miller's Fun Park is located at the very end of a field. On the opposite side of the field, about 3 miles down, is the beach, and across a single street are some woods. If our town is in the middle of nowhere, Miller's is basically on the moon. Anyway, my cousin Emma and I decided one summer night that we really wanted to go go-karting. It was around 10 p.m. We knew that it would be almost deserted, but that's exactly the way we liked it. I picked her up from her house and we made the long drive down. Once we arrived and parked in the nearly empty parking lot, we hopped out of the car and paid for some go-karting tickets. There was no one there except for a few kids in the arcade, and a man who looked to be in his 60s or so, sitting on the bench near the batting cages. Emma and I really paid him no mind and made our way to the go-kart track. Like I said, these go-karts were incredibly dangerous. So, I was focused on nothing but making sure I wasn't going to skid and flip. This is why I didn't notice the man walking over to the fence and watching us until we pulled into the lanes. After our last lap, he was standing on the other side of the fence right where I'd parked. He gawked at me with the most unsettling expression. A creepy smile dawned on his cracked lips as his dark eyes gleamed. I managed an uneasy smile and handed another ticket to the guy running the go-karts. He was obviously higher than a kite and was completely oblivious as to what was going on. Emma and I went off again, but this time I really couldn't focus. The guy at the fence was giving me the worst type of feeling. My eyes were constantly finding their way to where he stood, unmoving, watching us every time we came within his line of sight. The thing that was bothering me the most, though, was that we only had 3 tickets, and we were on our second-to-last run. He was standing directly next to the exit gate. I was just praying he would move on before we were done, but of course there was no such luck. Our last go came and went, and I had no choice but to pull in next to him, unbuckle my seatbelt, and exit my go-kart. I looked over at Emma just a few feet away to see if she was as scared as I was. She didn't even seem to notice. She bounced over and bragged about how she'd beat me the last 2 times. I barely paid attention. As soon as we passed through the gate, the guy stepped out in front of us. "Hey there," he said. His voice was dry, and he smelled heavily of cigarettes. "What are you girls doing here all alone, huh?" My eyes darted over to Emma, who was looking at the man in both confusion and annoyance. What? It's so late. Do your parents know you're out this way?" The way he spoke reminded me of a snake almost. I quickly retorted, "Yes, they're waiting for us actually. We need to get going right now." This was a lie and probably did sound like it from my tone, but I tried to push past the man. It didn't work though. He grabbed my shoulders to keep me in front of him. "Nonsense. I saw you guys pull up and there was no one else with you." My heart dropped to my stomach. "Are you heading out now? Why don't I walk you to your car, huh?" I looked over to Emma for help. With one swift movement, she pulled me halfway behind her and started sizing this guy up. This was pretty dumb. We were both small, and though she's a few inches taller than me, none of us came anywhere near close to the size of this man. He had to be at least 6'2". Emma didn't seem to care, though. Actually, we were just heading to the arcade. Her boyfriend is going to meet us there. I did have a boyfriend at the time, but he obviously wasn't meeting us there. He wasn't even in town on this day. The man's face immediately changed. His smile disappeared, and he was now glaring at me with a look of annoyance in his eyes. I felt myself start to cower. "Boyfriend?" Emma didn't give me the time to say anything. She grabbed my arm and we quickly went past the man into the arcade. The kids from before had already left, and only a single employee was in sight. Still, it felt safer in there than it did outside. We ran to the back and hid behind the claw machine. What the hell did we do? I left my phone in my car, and there was no way we were going out there alone. The pothead go-kart guy had already disappeared into the small ticket shack. My friend didn't have hers either. She'd left it charging. We were going to have to make a break for it. He was probably waiting for us in the parking lot somewhere. What about the guy who runs the go-karts? Maybe we could get him to walk out with us? I shook my head. He's higher than Mount Everest right now. I don't want to risk running all the way to the ticket stand for nothing. We really didn't have a choice. We had to go. I gulped. I had never been so scared before in my entire life. Emma practically dragged me out of the exit, looking around to see if the man was nearby waiting. We thought the guy would emerge from the woods or something. Hurry up, get your keys out, Emma instructed. I pulled the keys from my pocket. We were about 20 feet from my car when I stopped dead in my tracks. I stared at my car keys in my hand and realized something horrifying in that moment. I had forgotten to lock the vehicle. Emma, I never locked the car. I didn't lock it. What if... I trailed off, but she knew what I was going to say. She began inching toward the car, and I grabbed her arm to stop her. She pulled away. I'm just going to peek. If I say run, you run. I nodded in agreement. She eventually made it close enough to see inside, but by the way she was squinting, I knew it was too dark to make out anything. My heart was beating out of my chest. What if he was in there? What if he jumped out and attacked her? Or what if we got in and he strangled me to death like in the movies? All of these thoughts were almost drowned out by the unmistakable sound of shoes slamming against pavement. My head whipped around instantly. There he was, sprinting at his full speed, coming directly from the woods. I screamed bloody murder and made a break for the car, jiggling the handle. I realized that in my panic I had locked it. Emma was already on the other side screaming at me to unlock the car. I fumbled with the keys, but managed to unlock the door. We practically threw ourselves inside. I just managed to close my door when I looked up and saw the man standing there, slamming his fists against the window and shouting incoherently. I was sobbing at this point. I barely managed to lock the doors as he went for the handle. He yanked it as hard as he could. Emma was screaming at me to go, and through my tears I shoved the key in the ignition and flew into reverse. The man was still chasing and yelling at us. Even as I reversed out of the parking lot and turned as fast as I could, I was driving like I was still on the go-kart track. I didn't care though. I was so upset that I could barely see the road through the flood of tears. Emma had to grab the steering wheel several times to keep us from crashing. Though obviously shaken up, she managed to hold her tears back and be the rational one out of the two of us. We drove at least 30 miles over the speed limit the whole way back to my house. We didn't tell either of my parents about what happened. Looking back, I wish we had though, because there was seriously something wrong with that man. At the time, we thought they would blame us somehow, so it stayed a secret between Emma and I, something we didn't even talk about until months after the horrifying encounter. It's safe to assume that we never went back to Miller's Park after that. This is a story of someone I knew and had to cut ties with because he was a real psycho. The first half would be to add context as to why I cut him off. The second half is what makes this a real scary story. I don't know if he uses Reddit, so I'll omit ages and locations. It started about 4 years ago. I was living in a friend's house while attending a nearby university. It was myself, my friend, his sister, and their parents. Roughly about 2 weeks into staying there, my friend's sister invited her boyfriend to live in the house too. By all accounts, he was a pretty cool guy at first. Very sociable, full of great stories. We often sat around the table for drinks or talked about life, having a smoke in the garden. Within the first month, however, as he started to get more comfortable, cracks started to show in his veneer. He would rant about government conspiracies, how he was always the wronged party. He was big into that Sigma male nonsense and martial arts, and Christ did he have a temper. He also had this big dog that he always kept in a cage. It was extremely violent. When he wasn't around, the dog even attacked his girlfriend and had to be put down. That's when the guilt trips towards her began, and the ranting really became incessant. About 2 months later, he had the bright idea to live in a shipping container, mainly because the parents wanted him out. He dragged his girlfriend along for the ride. I'm not talking about one of those chic little restoration jobs either. This was a real rented container in a storage yard among the outskirts of town. He would intimidate and threaten the staff there constantly until they had to call the police on him. This, of course, was just another conspiracy. Of course, he became increasingly violent to his girlfriend as well, to the point where the family had to get involved to get her out of there. I stuck close to them, having to pretend to be on his side until we could safely get her out. They broke up, which he blamed me for, claiming that I was poisoning her against him to make her mine. She has a new partner now, and they're very happy. We all blocked this psycho on everything possible, but he continued to harass everyone until he eventually disappeared, or so we thought. Fast forward to last year. I started to receive these messages over social media from several different accounts, blocking each one in turn when I discovered who it was. Some were friendly, some were hostile, and one of these profiles even pretended to be someone I knew from university. We talked about life and how things were going, and eventually I was invited to a house party, claiming that it was a free house and plenty of people were coming. I took the time off work, made my travel plans, and kept talking to this friend coming to the date of the party. I mentioned it to my friend's sister, and she was interested in going herself. Until I mentioned the address, she began to panic. The address in question was a property belonging to the crazy ex's father that was scheduled for sale. I waited until the day of the party and called the police to check the property, claiming a suspected break-in. They found 5 people there, including the ex. Parked out front was a butcher van, equipped for food storage, and a collection of knives, hammers, and rope. Let's just say that I'm glad I didn't decide to go. It was around summer of 2007, and I was about 8 at the time. My grandpa and his wife took my little sister and I to this music festival to get us out of the house. I don't really remember that much. I do remember it was a big field with people sitting on blankets that they brought with them, as well as fancy bottles full of drinks. There was a stage about 50 yards ahead of where we were. A band started playing some music that I didn't recognize. The sun had set by now, and the sky had just turned a real dark blue. Linda, my grandpa's wife, stood up and said she was getting something to drink. I asked if I could go as well, since I was pretty thirsty myself, and it was really hot outside. She grabbed my hand and brought me with her. We both got some smoothies. We were heading back to where my sister and grandpa were, when all of a sudden, people started screaming and running. Linda grabbed me and picked me up, making me drop my smoothie. We hid behind a food truck, and I started crying because I was really confused and scared. The smoothie had also spilled all over me, so I was really sticky. I was, and still am, a kind of finicky kid. I also had bronchitis at the time, so I was beginning to wheeze heavily. Linda held me and shushed me gently to calm me down. I hiccuped and tried to calm down. With all the screaming still surrounding me, though, I got scared again. I recall my chest feeling tight. "Baby, you need to calm down, okay? Breathe. Just copy my breathing." Once I was calm enough, and the terrifying excitement died down, we cautiously made our way back. Linda then asked my grandpa what even happened. Apparently, two guys had started arguing when one suddenly pulled out a gun and started going crazy. We sat down on our blanket, and I realized I was still thirsty. Linda went on her own this time to get everyone a water bottle, while my sister, who was about 3 at the time, and myself stayed put. My grandpa comforted me and told me everything was okay. Not even 20 minutes later, though, we heard another single shot and more screams. My grandpa grabbed me up, much like Linda had done before. She in turn grabbed my sister, and we ran off, leaving the blankets we had behind. I don't really remember much after that. I remember falling asleep in the car and waking up with my head on Grandpa's shoulder. He was telling my mom about what had happened. Of course, my mom was worried. Ultimately, it was decided we would stick to playing in our neighborhood for a while, and no more festivals for quite some time. It was really a heart-racing experience for me. I recently had a very frightening experience. It all started when my friend started living alone. I'm just going to call her A for the sake of anonymity. A lived at home until she was in her early 20s. She loved it, but she felt as if it was time to spread her wings and find her own place. She found a really great place for a decent price and began living alone soon after. I distinctly remember just how excited she was about moving in. Well, it was all smiles to begin with, but after about a month, she came to a disturbing realization. She was being stalked by someone, and she had no idea of the identity of her stalker. When she told me she thought she was being stalked, I thought, wow, that's a bit of a bold claim. I wondered if she was seeing the same person in different places and being a little paranoid or something. After all, she really hadn't said what made her think this was happening. I was proven very wrong, though. When she told me a bit more, I realized it was very serious. Whenever she came home from work, she would always check the mail. Not too long into her life in her new apartment, she found something in her letter cage at the front door. There was an envelope, a blank envelope that must have just been hand-delivered. She said that before she even opened it, she already felt sick to her stomach. She hadn't told anyone besides me or her family her new apartment's address, so she knew this envelope must be hiding some strange contents. She opened it up and read what was inside. "Your underwear color is pretty flashy, you know." That's all that was written in there. When she told me that, I was genuinely worried for her. I thought about how I would react if I found that in my mail. Just how frightened would that make me feel, especially if I had just started living alone for the first time. She received that creepy letter about a month after she first moved in. She asked me what I would do if I were her. I honestly said I would go back home and live with my parents for a while, maybe even for good. Maybe the apartment was the target of the stalker, and that's why the last person moved out. Maybe that's why she'd gotten such a great deal on it in the first place. And that's what I thought at the time. A wasn't interested in going back home, though. Her new place was much closer to work for her commute. She could get to work within 20 minutes or so. If she went home, it would take 4 times longer. She said that she was looking for a new place to live. She told the renters she wanted to go as well. She seemed like she had a hold on things, so maybe it wouldn't be too bad. For me personally, I wouldn't want to spend another moment in that apartment if I received a weird letter like that. Surprisingly, things kind of simmered down for a while, maybe close to a month and a half. I didn't really hear from her again during that time. One evening, though, I got a message from her. All it said was, "There's been another letter." She took a photo of the contents of the letter as well. There were just 5 sentences. I wish I had the photo to share right now, but it happened about 3 phones ago. When the photo finally downloaded, I read the words and gasped. Here are the sentences exactly. "Your hair is too long, you know. You'd look even cuter with shorter hair. Oh, and don't wear a skirt again. I want to see you smile more. I love you. There seemed to be no context, no theme through the message. The handwriting was really scratchy and strange, too. It was really disturbing, a window into someone else's mind. I couldn't help but imagine how horrible it would be for A to have those horrible words in her home. I messaged her back and said she should come over. She could stay at my house tonight. She replied that she was too scared to even open the door right now. I rode the train to her side of town and literally bundled her into a taxi. I took her back to my place. She stayed with her parents and at my place alternatively after that second letter. I guess she wanted to stay away from the apartment for a while. For about a week or so, she stayed with us. After that week, she called the manager and told him everything that had happened so far. I said I would go back with her as moral support. I already imagined that I would stand by the door while she stuffed her suitcase or something. We met the apartment owner, and he went with us to her apartment. As we went up the stairs, before we got anywhere you could consider close to her door, we all noticed something strange. There was a mound of letters sticking out of her door. We didn't want to get any closer. I know I felt that way at least. I knew my friend wouldn't be going anywhere near that apartment. When she handed me the key to her door, I decided I would do it for her. My friend was in need, and I knew she was stressed out. I headed into her apartment, but the apartment owner stood by the door. I ignored the mound of letters jutting out of her mail slot and the overflowing letter cage. I gathered the things I thought A would need the most and grabbed the letters and stuffed them into a plastic bag. I then ran for it. I threw away all of those letters. I didn't open a single one of them. A said she would never return to that apartment again and stayed with her parents. Thankfully, the apartment owner actually had a heart and allowed her to leave without incurring any charges or being difficult about it. Since that experience, A has showed no interest in living alone again, much to the delight of her more than slightly controlling parents. They loved having her back home. They weren't even that sympathetic from what she told me. Maybe they saw it as a lesson she was supposed to learn from, for some unknown reason. She's not just scared of leaving her family home, though. She's now scared of receiving letters or any kind of mail. I guess if you have an experience like that, you can imagine how living alone again would be absolutely terrifying. She seems to be carrying a lot of trauma. It's not nice to see. I get it, though. Those letters spilling out of her door and wedged in the mail slot really gave me the creeps to see. I still dread to think of the content of those letters. I'm a 20-year-old female, but the story took place when I was 11. I was with my younger cousin, who's also a woman, and was around 8 years old at this time. We'll call her Julie. Our small town was located on the outskirts of Rockford, Illinois. It has a notorious reputation for drugs, violent crime, and sex trafficking. I lived in a neighborhood with a Casey's gas station within walking distance. I would often go there with my friends to buy energy drinks, snacks, and junk food. I could go there pretty much whenever I wanted, since nobody had to drive me there. My parents didn't keep too close of an eye on me. I was a fairly self-sufficient kid for my age, which was definitely to my advantage in this experience. One night, Julie and I decided to have a sleepover at my house. I told my parents we were going to walk to the gas station to grab some drinks with my leftover birthday money. They were talking and drinking with my aunt and uncle and just sort of shooed us away. It took maybe 10 to 15 minutes to walk there. As we were entering the parking lot, we saw this big semi-truck parked in front of the building. This wasn't that unusual, especially if supplies were being dropped off. As we were walking past it, a middle-aged man came out of the gas station and asked us how we were doing. We were polite kids, so we stayed and talked with him for a couple of minutes. "Do you girls like horses?" We both replied yes. "There are a couple of thoroughbreds in the trailer if you want to take a look at them real quick." Julie got really excited and instantly agreed. She began to make her way to the other side of the truck. I hesitated though. feeling that something was really off about this situation for two reasons. One, there wasn't a diesel pump at this gas station, and this man didn't seem to be dropping off any supplies at the store. There was another gas station that did have diesel pumps less than a mile down the road. Two, this trailer wasn't the right kind for him to have horses in it. Horse trailers have large windows, so the horses inside can breathe and whatnot. If you were to put a horse inside the trailer he was hauling, it would have suffocated. That was the biggest red flag for me. There was no way he actually had animals in this trailer. He took a step closer to us. I began to panic before blurting out that my dad was going to be here any minute now, so we were in a bit of a hurry. Julie protested, knowing that this was a lie. I had to cover this up quickly by saying that he had texted me while we were walking. "Oh, are you girls sure you don't want to see them? It would only take a second," he said. He inched closer to us. I apologized to him and grabbed Julie by the arm and pulled her into the gas station. I didn't stop there, though. I dragged her all the way to the women's bathroom. All the while, she was complaining about not getting to see the horses. I had to tell her exactly why I lied, and when she understood, she went quiet. After 5 minutes, I told her to wait there, and I'd go and see if the man was gone. As I peered through the window into the parking lot, I saw that the coast seemed to be clear. We bought what we came for and left with a bag in each of our arms. It was dark by this point, so to avoid any other interactions with strange people with dangerous propositions, we passed through a field instead of walking along the main road. We both figured that would be the better route from now on. We never told our parents about this encounter because we didn't want them to say that we could no longer go out by ourselves anymore. I know that sounds like a dumb reason, but I figured that if I could sniff out one potential kidnapping, I could do the same if it were to ever happen again. I was a strange kid. I really loved books and movies and shows related to kidnapping. The point is, I felt like I could handle this situation if it ever came my way again. Now that I'm older, I know that mindset was incredibly stupid, since I'm now aware of the gamble I was taking. I'm lucky that was the only time I had ever felt unsafe there. I grew up in a real messed up family. My dad was never home. He worked for some big arms company in Europe and spent most of his time lubricating shady backdoor deals in the former Eastern Bloc. We didn't miss him when he was away, because whenever he was home, it felt like a great dark cloud was hanging over our house. Everything we did was wrong. Nothing was ever good enough, and he made life impossible for me, my brother, and my mom. My mom gave up on trying to parent us when she realized how rotten we both were, my brother and I. I mean, she spent most of her days either drinking or high on Valium, and only ever emerged from her bedroom whenever we were being too obnoxious and loud. My brother, my older brother, liked motorcycles and spent most of his time either riding them, working on them, or buying them. Me, on the other hand, I found an even more dangerous hobby. If my brother worshipped speed, I worshipped self-destruction of all varieties. I took up smoking, started cutting, and with my hefty monthly allowance in hand, managed to become acquainted with some of the city's less scrupulous purveyors of narcotics. From the age of around 14 onwards, all I was interested in was chasing that next high. After 2 years of frying my brain with almost everything I could get my hands on, I suffered a kind of psychotic break and attempted to burn down my family home with my mother and brother asleep in their beds. First of all, nobody was hurt, thankfully. I'm eternally grateful for that. The fire spread quickly, and the amount of structural damage it inflicted at the home was catastrophic. My family was furious with me, obviously. We had to find some new place to live while extremely extensive repairs were being done. Only it wasn't going to be we. My mom and dad had suddenly decided they were going to find a hotel, maybe a rental home once they were settled. Me, though, I was headed to Jamaica. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Jamaica, as in the tropical island paradise? How is that a punishment at all? Well, if you put down your stereotypes for one moment, allow me to give you a brief but informative lesson in geography. Yes, lots of Jamaica is palm trees and white sandy beaches, but on the southwestern coast, the scenery changes quite dramatically. You go from something that looks like a tropical paradise to something that looks more like the Texas plains. That's the part of Jamaica I ended up going to, because I wasn't there for a vacation. I was there for a behavioral rehabilitation program. It was so harsh that it was literally illegal to run back in the United States. The program was run by two Americans out of a place called Tranquil Bay. Really turned out to be just about as ironic a name as they could have picked out. It cost $20,000 to send me there for 6 months. That's some people's entire salaries. I should have come back in time and invented Google for that kind of money. Instead, I soon found out they had next to no idea what they were doing. I remember having to go to a doctor in Utah first, who cleared me for international travel. Just over a week later, my dad was driving me to the airport, and I was trying not to cry. I was pretty bad like that, just completely spoiled. I could have easily killed my mom and brother, but I thought a few tears might cause my dad to turn the car around. Little did I know that 20 grand had already been transferred. I was going to Jamaica, even if he had to fly me there himself. When I landed at the airport, there was someone holding a sign with my name on it. I followed them to a car, and they drove me about 3 hours to pretty much the opposite side of Jamaica. We went out into the dusty hills, and it was there that the Tranquil Bay facility was located. After being taken inside, I was given my induction. The people were kind of nice and welcoming at first, but explained that was the last time they'd act like that with me until the day I graduated. When my program started, I'd be at level 1, which meant I'd be treated like crap. As I advanced through these levels, my treatment would supposedly get better and better. After that, life as I knew it changed completely. As of that moment, I had zero rights or liberties as a human being. I needed permission to speak, to stand, to walk anywhere. The more I complied, the more I advanced. I wasn't even allowed a bed at first. I had to go to the bathroom in a bucket. As time went on, I was allowed to visit an actual bathroom and was given access to hot showers and better food. It might sound harsh, but it also might seem like a functional system to your crazy parents who sent you there for a ton of money. After you've reached the 6th and highest level, you get to go home. But that's not how things worked out. My parents had paid for just 6 months, but I ended up staying there for more than a year. My parents had to pay out an extra 15 grand for the pleasure. I did everything I could to try and get home within that 6 months, but the program leaders did everything they could to sabotage me. They used just about any reason to demote you a level or two. It was all a scam to keep kids there longer than they needed to be. Anyone who rebelled or talked back in any way was punished heavily. It was with menial stuff at first, but if you persisted, you were made to do some really nasty stuff. I never did anything to warrant the harshest of punishments, so I don't know what they were. But I know that kids regularly got very ill or even injured after it. That was the best incentive to stick with the program. When people ask what the standards of living were like, I tell them that for anyone below level 6, it was worse than a U.S. prison. At least in prison, a certain standard of hygiene is enforced, and prisoners get access to proper medical treatment. We had neither of those. The bugs were the worst part, though. Almost all the accommodation blocks were infested with mosquitoes and sandworms and various other insects. Everyone below level 6 was coated in bug bites almost all the time. It wasn't much better for the staff either. Anyone below level 3 wasn't even allowed to wear shoes, and we were only allowed cold showers once a week. This meant that bug bites on the feet would soon get infected. This happened to me personally. The kids called it fat foot because it would cause your foot and ankle to balloon to double their size. You might think that would warrant a trip to the hospital, but no, they just give us some antibiotic cream and some painkillers, then make us go about our day as usual. At the lower levels, fights were also really common too. You put a bunch of brats together in near prisoner of war camp conditions, and you can bet your bottom dollar they'll lash out at one another. You might think the staff would want to stop things like that, but the truth was it was very useful to them. It allowed them to knock down any offenders down a few levels, ensuring their parents' continued financial cooperation. It also served as a great way of enforcing discipline in the higher ranks. You mess up and you'll be right back to fist-fighting the other kids to be the first to use the bucket in the morning. Now, long story short, I did manage to get out of there, but only after I convinced my mom the whole thing was a scam. If she hadn't listened to me, I don't want to imagine how much longer I could have been trapped there. Just so you know, I did get a little bit better after, but it wasn't because Tranquility Bay cured me. It was because the experience made me grow up. It was 2014. I was 12 when this happened. A little backstory. My mom had moved here from Mexico in the early 90s, so she couldn't find a steady job at the time, besides just cleaning buildings like clinics and banks. She always took at least one of my siblings, included me. We always argued on who would go to clean with her. This time it was me. We finished cleaning 3 banks. The 4th was always the last one. We'd usually get to the 4th bank at around 12 a.m. or so we'd always have to be cautious of druggies and other dangerous people who'd be out in the streets at night. They always seemed to assume that we could get them access to the machines which stored all the money. I was almost finished vacuuming and switching the bags of trash cans on this night when my mom handed me the keys to the entrance. She told me to wipe the windows outside. I was a bit hesitant because I'd never gone outside alone to wipe down the windows. I reluctantly agreed to go, though. I made my way out with a bucket and window wiper. That was when I heard a grown man screaming outside. I paused for a moment to listen for the man again, but I didn't hear anything. I was afraid to go outside, but I knew if I came back inside without wiping down the windows, my mom would scold me. I just bit the bullet and went out there. I dipped the window wiper in the water and started wiping away until I heard the same scream coming from off to my right. It sounded like it was getting closer. I know what you're probably all thinking. Why didn't I just drop all my shit right then and there and run inside? Well, being raised in a Hispanic household, my mom always spoon-fed me examples of family members not fearing danger. I was not going to let some maniac scare me from finishing my job. Of course, that all changed when he rounded the corner. He was huge and had a crazy beard which hung down to his lower chest. He had eyes as if he was on PCP. I froze, hoping he hadn't noticed me, but of course he did. At that moment, his mouth opened wider than I thought was humanly possible. He let out a yell so loud, I thought it would have been able to shatter the windows all around me. Have you ever seen the movie Veronica? If you have, then maybe you remember the scene where Veronica let out the scream after playing the Ouija board. Yeah, it was just like that. I fumbled around in my pockets for the keys and tried to open the door. I mean, damn, why couldn't my mom give me 1 pair of keys instead of 20 different ones on a ring? The man was slowly moving closer to me, no more than 15 feet away now. I finally unlocked the door, grabbed my shit, and ran inside. Right as I was about to shut it, though, the man latched onto the handle, trying to pry it open. I slammed my foot against the door on the right and pulled with all my might. I managed to slam the door closed. That's when the man, with so much malice in his eyes, yelled once more. He glared at me before walking back into the night. I got back into the building. Somehow, my mom hadn't heard a single thing. She was scrubbing the toilets in the restrooms. I didn't tell her what happened because I was in shock. We finally finished, and on our way out, she noticed handprints on the glass of the door. She commented on how much of an awful job I did. Needless to say, I never washed the windows again after that. We still pass by that bank every once in a while, and I can still sometimes hear that man's screams of anger. That was truly a terrifying time. This happened about 30 years ago, back when I was a university student. It was summer vacation, and everyone was heading back to their hometowns, including me and my friends. Thankfully, a few of my closer friends from my hometown went to the same university as me. At night, we would all hang out. We all thought we would miss our hometown when we left for higher education, but it turned out we were pretty bored by it when we came back. We never really did much when we hung out together, probably down to the fact that we were all poor students. We just got together and wasted time as a group. Unlike today, there were not that many bars or karaoke places, and even if there were, they felt a million miles away from our quiet little town. Our only source of fun, really, was one of our friends' cars. We would just pile in and head out on long drives. My friend had a job, so we always had fuel in the car. It was cool to go see the sea at midnight and just watch the waves ebb beneath the moon. Sometimes we would drive out into the mountains and look down at all the lights on the highway and the passing cars below. We would play music on the radio. We had all kinds of fun driving down roads we didn't know. One night, we stayed out and watched the sunrise over the mountains. I'd had lots of great memories from those days, but nothing compares to the memory of one night in particular. We were out for another drive. There were 3 of us in total that night, including me. We were driving down some rural town lanes, and we came to a rice field area. It was very open and wide. There was just a 1-lane road going through, and on either side of that road was nothing but fields. The street lights were very sparse, but beneath one of them up ahead, I could see a figure walking up the road towards us. As we drew closer, we realized that it was a woman. She was cradling what looked to be a child up against her chest. The woman twisted her body to shield the child from the light of our car's headlights. She was dressed in white, and she had long flowing hair. I think everyone in the car was feeling the same as I did. I took pity on her almost instantly. That poor woman, walking through the middle of nowhere at this time of night. I thought she must have been kicked out of the house because of her husband or someone complaining about the baby crying or something. That must be why she was walking around trying to get her child to calm down, to get the child to sleep. My friend driving must have felt the same as I did, because without saying a word to any of us, he pulled the car to a stop. He then said he was going to offer her a ride. He offered and she accepted. She hopped in the back and sat behind the driver right next to me. I opened the door for her since her hands were occupied. My friends asked where she was going, and she replied to just go straight ahead. It was really quiet in the car after. A little awkward, actually. I thought to myself, oh great, at least the baby's asleep now. I looked over to check, and that's when I saw something terrifying. She wasn't holding a baby at all. A chill ran down my spine when I realized what she was holding. It was an urn, pressed against her chest and tucked into the crook of her arm like a baby. I think some of my friends must have realized too. The car was dead silent. We kept driving straight into the darkness ahead. Just go straight, please. That's what she asked us to do. That's what we did. I didn't think any of us wanted to break the silence. I don't think we could have. It was just all so creepy. Once I saw the urn in her arms, I couldn't bring myself to look at her anymore. I didn't know if this woman was going to do something strange. After a while, though, I noticed she was staring at me. I could feel her gaze upon me. I really wished my friend had never picked her up at all. I don't remember how long it took. Seconds seemed to crawl by, but eventually she said in a very small voice, "Stop here, please." This road and the road we'd picked her up on were barely any different. We were still in the middle of nowhere, with wide open fields all around, and no houses anywhere in sight. My friend did as she asked, though. He stopped the car. She opened the door and got out and left. We didn't know what we should do. If it happened now, and if I was the driver, maybe things would have been a little different. She headed off behind the car, seemingly back toward the direction we'd just come from. My friend started the vehicle again. I looked back to see the woman twisting her body to shelter what we now knew was just an urn from the lights of our car's taillights. No one said a word. We just drove off. We never went to that area again. No one had to ask my friend to drive us home either. He just knew to do it instinctively. That night, he drove faster than usual. Even to this day, when I go back to my hometown and I bump into one of those old friends of mine, it feels as if no one wants to talk about that night. No one likes mentioning it or that woman. I often wonder about the woman's identity, though. I wonder why she was walking up and down that narrow road in the dead of night. Did she lose her child? Was that the place she lost her child? Every time I think back on that night, I feel sorry for that woman. She must have been miserable. Our actions could have maybe been a little better that night. For instance, we could have called the police for help or driven her someplace else. Still, we did what she asked for. Her calm demeanor, as well as her choice of words, made me feel very strange about the whole thing. She was really polite. I feel bad for that woman. I hope she's not wandering around the dark roads in the middle of nowhere anymore. In college, I lived with 3 roommates. It was Thursday night of midterms, and my one roommate and I were up late in our rooms studying. The third one went out to drink because he was all done for the week. Well, around 3 in the morning, I was still in my room at my desk studying away, when out of the corner of my eye I saw a figure in my doorway. Up to this point, I'd had my headphones on, so I couldn't hear anything. I quickly ripped them off and turned toward my door, only to see my one roommate who was in his room studying all night. You'd think my nerves would be calmed at this point, but he had this half-confused, half-scared look in his eyes. I asked him what was up, and he responded with, "Look who's in our kitchen." My nerves were still on full alert as I stepped out of my room and into the kitchen. It was dimly lit due to college students not replacing the other 5 bulbs that burnt out. I could see someone facing away from us, leaning over our table. Initially, I thought it was our third roommate, just getting drunk and coming home from a long night out. When I placed my hand on their shoulder and turned them around, though, I realized I was wrong. Instead, it was an older friend of ours. Right away, I noticed they were covered in blood. Not only was there a pool of blood on the table and floor, but it was also pouring out from where his lip was once attached. I say that because it looked as if someone had taken his bottom lip, cut it from one side to the other, and flipped it inside out. Seeing the way it dangled there was horrifying. Immediately, I told the other roommate to grab some towels. At this point, our friend had yet to say anything, other than a few mumbles about falling. He was clearly out of it. When my roommate came back with the towels and helped my friend cover the bleeding, that's when I actually had a chance to step back and observe the kitchen. There was a pair of scissors on the table, broken in half and soaked in blood. I nudged my roommate and nodded to the kitchen table, and a look of confusion came right back on his face. I tried asking the friend again what happened, and this time he mumbled something about being jumped by a bunch of kids. I further inspected our house, the concrete porch outside, and any other signs that the bleeding had started before the kitchen area, but there were no signs. I told my roommate we clearly needed to get him to the ER. We took my car and laid down a dozen more towels to help with all the bleeding. To add more mystery to this story, as we were walking into the ER waiting room, a group of 4 kids or so were nudging each other and pointing at our friend while chuckling. At first, I just waved it off to some random kids gawking at a kid with his lip hanging on by a thread. Then they got up to leave though, and as they were leaving, they looked over and said, "Hey, friend's name, you have a rough night there?" The way they said that gave me a sick feeling. They knew exactly what was wrong with them. And as they left, all I could think to do was ask them if they'd seen him earlier. They all looked at each other for a moment before replying, "Nah, we never seen that guy in our lives." And they turned around and hopped into their friend's car that was parked outside. Seeing that it was 4 in the morning at this point, my brain didn't comprehend how weird this encounter was before they left. Anyway, we finally got him into a room. An officer came in and tried interviewing him. After a few moments of refusing to talk, our friend asked my roommate and I to leave the room. After 15 minutes, the officer came out and asked us for the details of the story. After going over everything, he confirmed to us that our friend had told him the same alternating story as well and had no clue what happened. I mentioned the kids, but he didn't seem interested and eventually left the hospital. The nurse informed us that our friend was on painkillers and there was no point of sticking around, so we left. The next night, my roommate and I, along with a dozen more friends, went on spring break and didn't really talk about it or hear from our friend, other than a mutual friend saying he'd gotten plastic surgery on his lips and would be fine. Fast forward a few weeks. He came over and thanked us for helping him out, but was really hesitant to talk about that night, other than to offer his gratitude. To this day, we still have no idea what happened, and every possible scenario creeps me out to think about. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have any feedback for me as well, be sure to leave that in comments below the video. If you guys have a story you'd like to send in, or if you'd like to contact me for any reasons, there will be links to my social media in the description below the video, including my Facebook, Gmail, and Twitter accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is if it has one, what type of story it is if it has one, and how you'd like to be credited in the description below the video. Please make sure to include as much detail as you feel comfortable with and try to use as much proper grammar as possible to make sure you have the highest chance of appearing in a future video. Overall, I think that's pretty much it for now, guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.